bear cub was being dragged by a train. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The snow fell in thick, heavy curtains across the abandoned mountain road. Olivia clutched her sleeping 3-year-old daughter Harper to her chest, the child's soft breaths warming her neck as she trudged forward. Their car had skidded off the road an hour ago, the tires sinking helplessly into a snowbank as the engine sputtered and died. No signal on her phone, no houses in sight, just endless white and the fading daylight that threatened to leave them stranded in darkness. "Just a little farther, sweetie," Olivia whispered, though Harper couldn't hear through her dreams. Her arms ached from carrying the child, but she couldn't bear to wake her. Not yet, not until there was hope to offer. The wind howled, slicing through Olivia's thin jacket. She dressed for a quick trip to her mother's cabin, not for a winter survival trek. Stupid, stupid, stupid. She should have listened to the weather warnings, should have waited until morning, should have packed emergency supplies. But the argument with Rick had pushed her over the edge, sending her fleeing from their home with tear-blurred vision and a desperate need for her mother's comforting presence. A distant howl pierced the air, different from the wind. Wolves. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. She quickened her pace, ignoring the burning in her thighs and the numbness creeping into her fingers. The trees around her seemed to lean in closer, watching, waiting for her to falter. Harper stirred, her eyelids fluttering. "Mommy. Cold. I know, baby. I know." Olivia kissed her daughter's forehead, alarmed at how cool the skin felt beneath her lips. "We're going to find somewhere warm soon." Another howl, closer this time. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled on a hidden rock, nearly losing her balance. Harper whimpered, sensing her mother's fear even in her half-asleep state. Through the swirling snow, Olivia spotted something. A dark shape against the white, square and solid. A cabin? No, too small. As she drew closer, she realized it was an old shed, weathered and leaning slightly to one side, but intact. Shelter. She pushed forward with renewed strength, reaching the wooden structure just as darkness fell completely. The door protested with a groan as she pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with forgotten tools and the musty scent of abandonment. But it was dry, and the walls blocked the biting wind. Olivia set Harper down on an old tarp, wrapping her own scarf around the child's thin shoulders. "Look what Mommy found us, a special hiding place." Harper's eyes widened, taking in their surroundings. Like camping? Just like camping. Olivia forced a smile, though terror still gripped her heart. No one knew where they were. Her phone battery was nearly dead, and outside, the storm grew fiercer, howling like a hungry beast. A scratching sound at the door made them both freeze. Soft at first, then more insistent, claws against wood. Harper clutched her mother's arm. "What's that?" Olivia pulled her daughter behind her, reaching for the nearest object, a rusted garden hoe. "Stay back, sweetie." The scratching continued, followed by a low whine, not a wolf, something smaller. With trembling hands, Olivia cracked the door open an inch. 2 golden eyes stared back at her from a snow-covered face. A dog, no, a fox, with fur as white as the storm around it. It limped slightly, holding one paw off the ground. "Fox?" Harper whispered in wonder, peering around her mother's legs. The animal whined again, its breath visible in the freezing air. Blood matted the fur around its injured paw. "It's hurt, Mommy." Harper's voice held none of the fear Olivia felt, only concern. Wild animals are dangerous, Harper, especially when they're hurt. But even as she said it, Olivia saw the desperation in the creature's eyes, the same desperation she felt herself. Outside, the wind screamed. The fox trembled, its thin body barely visible against the snow except for those pleading golden eyes. Harper tugged at Olivia's jacket. "Please, Mommy, it's cold like us." Olivia hesitated, the hoe still gripped tightly in her hand. Common sense warred with compassion. They had so little space, so little warmth to share. But turning away a creature in need felt like inviting bad karma when they so desperately needed good fortune. With a sigh, she opened the door wider. "Come on then, but stay in that corner." The fox limped inside, leaving tiny blood-stained prints on the wooden floor. It circled 3 times in the corner farthest from them before curling into a tight ball, golden eyes watching them warily. Harper smiled, leaning against her mother. "We're not alone anymore." Olivia pulled her daughter close, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake or a life-saving decision. Outside, the night grew darker, the storm wilder. Inside their fragile shelter, human and animal eyes gleamed in the darkness, each wondering what dawn would bring. The fox watched as Olivia gathered bits of old newspaper and wood scraps from around the shed. With numb fingers, she attempted to light a small fire in a rusted metal bucket she'd found overturned in the corner. 3 matches wasted before the 4th caught, the tiny flame dancing precariously before taking hold of the paper. "Look, Mommy made fire." Harper clapped her small hands together, delight momentarily overriding the danger of their situation. The meager warmth barely reached them, but the light cast a golden glow that made the shed seem less threatening. Shadows danced across the walls as Olivia took stock of their surroundings more carefully. Old gardening tools, a broken chair, some empty burlap sacks that could serve as blankets. Not much, but enough to survive the night if the temperature didn't drop further. "I'm hungry," Harper whispered, her earlier excitement fading as reality set in. Olivia reached into her coat pocket, producing a slightly squashed granola bar, the only food she'd grabbed in her hasty departure. "We'll share this, and tomorrow we'll find more food, I promise." She broke the bar in 2, giving Harper the larger portion. As the child nibbled slowly, Olivia's gaze drifted to the fox. Its golden eyes reflected the firelight, watching the food with unmistakable hunger. "Fox hungry too?" Harper asked, following her mother's gaze. "Probably," Olivia admitted, "but wild animals find their own food." Harper looked down at her half-eaten granola bar, then back at the injured fox. Before Olivia could stop her, she broke off a small piece and placed it on the floor, halfway between them and the animal. "Harper, no," Olivia began, but fell silent as the fox cautiously uncurled itself and limped toward the offering. It sniffed the morsel, then delicately picked it up, retreating quickly to its corner to eat. "See, sharing is caring," Harper said with the simple wisdom of childhood. Olivia couldn't help but smile despite their dire circumstances. "Yes, it is, sweetheart." The fox finished its small treat and began licking its injured paw again. The blood had dried, but the animal still couldn't put weight on it. "What hurt the fox, Mommy?" "I don't know. Maybe it stepped on something sharp in the snow." Harper frowned, concern etching her small features. "Can we help it?" Olivia hesitated. Getting close to a wild animal was dangerous, but the fox seemed more afraid of them than they were of it, and its injury could become infected if left untreated. Perhaps helping the creature would be a good distraction from their own predicament. "We can try," she finally said. "But you need to stay back while I check, okay?" Harper nodded solemnly, watching as Olivia slowly approached the fox, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Easy there, we just want to help." The fox pressed itself against the wall, golden eyes wide with fear, but didn't try to run or snap at her. Slowly, Olivia extended her hand, allowing the animal to sniff her fingers. After a tense moment, the fox relaxed slightly. "Good," Olivia murmured. "Now, let's see that paw." With gentle movements, she examined the injured limb. A jagged piece of metal, perhaps from a trap, was embedded in the pad of the fox's paw. The wound wasn't deep, but it would need to be cleaned. "Harper, in my purse there's a small first aid kit. Can you get it for me?" The child scrambled to obey, returning with the tiny emergency kit Olivia always carried. With trembling hands, she extracted tweezers, antiseptic wipes, and a small roll of gauze. "This will hurt," she warned the fox, though she knew it couldn't understand her words. "But then you'll feel better." As if sensing her intentions, the fox remained surprisingly still as she carefully removed the metal shard and cleaned the wound. Only when she applied the antiseptic did it flinch, a small whimper escaping its throat. "Almost done," Olivia soothed, wrapping the paw in a small piece of gauze. "There?" The fox examined its bandaged paw with curious eyes before looking up at Olivia. For a moment, human and animal regarded each other with something like mutual understanding. "Fox says thank you," Harper declared, settling back beside the fire. Olivia returned to her daughter's side, pulling her close for warmth. "Maybe it does." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the shed, a fragile peace had formed between the unlikely companions. As Harper drifted off to sleep in her arms, Olivia watched the fox curl up again, its breathing slower and more relaxed. She hadn't saved them yet. Morning would bring new challenges, finding food, seeking help, making their way back to civilization. But for now, in this moment, they had shelter, fire, and an unexpected ally. It would have to be enough. Olivia closed her eyes, listening to the harmonious sounds of her daughter's gentle breathing and the soft snuffles of the sleeping fox. Despite everything, a small spark of hope kindled in her chest. They would survive this night, and tomorrow would bring new possibilities. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would test them in ways she could never have imagined, and that their wild companion would play a role far beyond that of a simple injured fox. A haunting howl pierced the night, jolting Olivia from her shallow sleep. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting long shadows across the shed's interior. Harper still slumbered against her chest, small fingers clutching Olivia's jacket even in sleep. But something had changed. The fox stood alert by the door, ears perked forward, its injured paw held slightly off the ground despite the bandage. It turned to look at Olivia, those golden eyes seeming to carry a warning. Another howl, closer this time. Not the wind, wolves. Olivia's blood ran cold. She'd heard stories of wolf packs growing bolder during harsh winters, venturing closer to human settlements in search of food. Out here, isolated and defenseless, they would make easy prey. The fox pawed at the door, looking back at Olivia with an urgency she couldn't ignore. It repeated the gesture, more insistent this time. "You want out?" Olivia whispered, confusion mingling with fear. The storm still raged outside. She could hear it battering the shed's thin walls. Why would the fox want to leave their shelter, unless it knew something she didn't? With gentle movements, Olivia shifted Harper onto the burlap sacks, tucking them around her daughter's small form. The child stirred, but didn't wake, exhaustion keeping her in deep slumber. "Stay asleep, baby," Olivia murmured, pressing a kiss to Harper's forehead before moving toward the door. The fox backed away as she approached, watching her with intelligent eyes that seemed too knowing for a wild animal. Olivia hesitated, her hand on the rough wooden plank that served as a door handle. Opening it meant letting in the bitter cold, perhaps even drawing attention from whatever lurked in the darkness outside. But the fox's behavior gnawed at her. Animals sensed danger long before humans. If it was trying to warn them, a low growl from outside made the decision for her. Close. Too close. Something was circling the shed. With trembling hands, Olivia cracked the door open an inch, peering out into the swirling snow. At first, she saw nothing but white darkness. Then a shadow moved, large and lumbering, too big to be a wolf. A bear, in this storm. The fox slipped through the narrow opening before Olivia could stop it, its white fur instantly blending with the snow. She watched in disbelief as it limped purposefully toward the shadow, yipping loudly. The shadow turned, and Olivia's heart stopped. It wasn't a bear. It was a man. Bundled in layers of winter clothing with a rifle slung across his back and a large pack weighing down his shoulders, he towered in the darkness like a mountain himself. His beard was crusted with ice, his face weathered by elements and age. He stared at the fox with obvious surprise, then followed its gaze back to the shed. Their eyes met through the cracked door. Olivia froze, trapped between slamming the door shut and calling out for help. A stranger in these conditions could be salvation or danger. There was no way to know. The fox circled the man's legs once, then bounded back toward the shed, leaving tiny tracks in the fresh snow. It stopped halfway, looking back at the man as if urging him to follow. "Well, I'll be damned." The man's voice carried through the storm, rough but not threatening. Never seen a fox act like that before. Olivia swallowed her fear. They needed help. Harper needed warmth, food, proper shelter. Taking a chance on this stranger might be their only option. "Please," she called out, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "My daughter and I are stranded. Our car went off the road miles back." The man approached slowly, his footsteps crunching in the snow. As he drew closer, Olivia could see his eyes, clear blue and crinkled at the corners, more curious than menacing. "Name's Samuel," he said, stopping a respectful distance from the door. "Samuel Blackwood. I've got a cabin about 2 miles north of here. Was out checking my traps when I noticed smoke." He nodded toward the thin wisp still rising from the shed's makeshift chimney. "Not many folks out here, especially in a storm like this." The fox had returned to the shed's entrance, sitting beside Olivia as if they were old companions. Samuel's eyes widened at the sight. "That your pet?" he asked, gesturing toward the fox. "No." Olivia shook her head. "It was injured. We helped it, and it stayed." Samuel studied the fox, then Olivia, a new respect dawning in his expression. "Foxes don't take to people easy. Must be something special about you." Before Olivia could respond, Harper's voice piped up from behind her. "Mommy? Who's talking?" The child appeared at Olivia's side, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her small face pale in the moonlight that now broke through the thinning clouds. Samuel's weathered face softened at the sight of the child. He knelt down, bringing himself to Harper's eye level despite the snow soaking into his pants. "Hello there, little miss. I'm Samuel. I live in these mountains." Harper studied him with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Are you a mountain man? Like in my storybooks?" A chuckle escaped Samuel's lips, the sound surprisingly warm in the cold night. "Something like that. Your mama and you shouldn't be out here in this weather. My cabin's not far. It's warm, and I've got food to share." Harper looked up at her mother, excitement replacing fear in her eyes. "Can we go, Mommy? Please? Olivia hesitated. Samuel seemed genuine, and they had few options. The storm had lessened slightly, but the temperature was dropping rapidly. The shed wouldn't protect them much longer. "We'd be grateful," she finally said. "I'm Olivia. This is Harper." Samuel nodded, standing again. "Bundle the little one up as best you can. I've got an extra coat in my pack." He shrugged off his backpack, digging through it to produce a worn but thick flannel coat. "It'll swallow you whole, but it'll keep the cold out." As Olivia wrapped Harper in layers of the clothing they had, adding Samuel's oversized coat around her own shoulders, the fox watched from the doorway, its bandaged paw leaving tiny imprints in the snow. "What about Fox?" Harper asked, pointing to their animal companion. "It's still hurt. It needs warm, too." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Fox? You named it?" "Harper has a way with animals," Olivia explained, embarrassed by her daughter's attachment to the wild creature. "But of course we understand it can't come with us." To her surprise, Samuel knelt and extended a hand toward the fox. "This, the one you helped?" he asked, noticing the bandage. The fox approached cautiously, sniffing his weathered fingers before allowing a brief touch to its head. "Well, I'll be," Samuel murmured. "Never seen one so trusting." He looked up at Olivia. "The little miss is right. Storm like this, injured like that. It won't last the night alone." Without further discussion, he scooped the fox up in one fluid motion. The animal tensed but didn't struggle, settling against his chest with wary acceptance. "Sometimes nature sends us strange companions," Samuel said simply. "Let's get moving before the storm picks up again." Olivia gathered their few belongings while Samuel carried both the fox and Harper, who had instantly taken to their mountain rescuer. As they stepped into the night, leaving the shed behind, Olivia felt the weight of uncertainty lift slightly from her shoulders. They followed Samuel through the snow, the world around them a hushed white landscape broken only by their footprints and labored breathing. The man moved with confidence, finding paths Olivia couldn't see, avoiding hidden dangers with the instinct of someone who had lived in these mountains all his life. "Not much further now," he called over his shoulder after they'd been walking for what felt like hours. "Just beyond that ridge." Olivia's legs burned with exhaustion, her lungs raw from the cold air, but Harper seemed content in Samuel's strong arms, chattering about the fox and the snow, and 100 other things that crossed her curious mind. The child's resilience amazed Olivia. While she had been consumed with fear and worst-case scenarios, Harper had found wonder and friendship in their misadventure. "There she is," Samuel's voice broke through Olivia's thoughts. They crested a small hill, and below them sat a cabin that looked like it had grown naturally from the mountainside. Smoke curled invitingly from a stone chimney, and warm light spilled from windows partially obscured by snow. It wasn't large, but compared to the shed, it looked like paradise. "My home for 40 years, Samuel said with unmistakable pride. "Not much to look at, but she's sturdy." As they approached, Olivia noticed details she hadn't seen from a distance. Wind chimes made from antlers and colored glass hung from the porch eaves. Intricate carvings decorated the wooden door. Animals and trees and mountains, telling stories of the wilderness around them. This wasn't just a cabin, it was a sanctuary crafted with love and patience. Samuel shifted Harper in his arms to open the door. Warmth rushed out to greet them, along with the smell of wood smoke and something delicious simmering on a stove. Come in," he ushered them inside. "Get those wet things off before you catch your death." The interior was surprisingly spacious, with rough-hewn furniture ranged around a massive stone fireplace that dominated one wall. pelts and woven blankets added color and warmth to the wooden surroundings. A pot bubbled on a cast-iron stove, and dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams alongside strings of garlic and small bundles of feathers. Samuel set Harper down gently on a bench near the fire, then placed the fox on a braided rug beside it. The animal circled once before settling down, golden eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "Hang your wet things there." Samuel pointed to hooks beside the fireplace. "I'll fetch some dry clothes. Might be big, but they'll keep you warm." As he disappeared into another room, Olivia helped Harper out of her damp layers, rubbing the child's small hands between her own to restore circulation. "I like Mountain Man," Harper whispered, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. "And his house is magic." Olivia had to admit there was something magical about the cabin. Despite its rustic appearance, it felt safe, almost enchanted, like stepping into a fairy tale far removed from their modern lives. Samuel returned with a stack of clothing. "These were my daughters," he explained, handing smaller items to Harper. "She outgrew them years ago, but I never could bring myself to part with them." Olivia accepted the clothes meant for her, a faded flannel shirt and wool pants that might have once been blue. "You have a daughter?" A shadow passed over Samuel's face. "Had," he corrected gently. "Lost her and my wife 20 years back. Influenza." "I'm so sorry." Olivia's heart ached for this stranger who had shown them such kindness despite his own loss. Samuel nodded once, acknowledgement without invitation for further questions. "Get changed. I'll dish up some stew. You both need warming from the inside out." As they changed into the dry clothes, Olivia noticed Harper watching the fox with concern. "Is Fox's paw still hurting?" Samuel, who was ladling thick stew into wooden bowls at his small table, glanced over. "Let me have a look after we eat. I know a thing or two about tending wounds, human and animal alike." The meal was simple, but delicious. Venison stew rich with root vegetables, and herbs Olivia couldn't identify. Harper ate with surprising appetite, color returning to her cheeks with each spoonful. Even the fox received a small bowl of broth and meat, which it consumed with delicate precision before returning to its spot by the fire. As they ate, Samuel asked few questions about their circumstances. Instead, he shared stories of the mountains, of spring flowers that bloomed beneath the snow, of elk herds that passed through valleys no human had named, of stars that seemed close enough to touch on clear winter nights. Harper listened with rapt attention, occasionally adding her own observations or asking questions that made the old man smile. There was no judgment in his eyes when he looked at Olivia, no curiosity about why a mother and child would be traveling mountain roads alone in a snowstorm. After the meal, as promised, Samuel examined the fox's injured paw. He removed Olivia's makeshift bandage with careful fingers, examining the wound with a tracker's precision. "Clean work," he commented, nodding approvingly at Olivia, "but it needs something more to heal proper." From a wooden cabinet, he retrieved a small jar of greenish paste. "Old recipe, helps with infection and pain." The fox remained unnaturally still as he applied the salve and wrapped the paw in a fresh bandage. Only when he finished did it yawn widely, showing sharp white teeth, before curling into a tight ball and closing its eyes. "Never seen a wild fox act so tame," Samuel mused, washing his hands in a basin. "Almost like it understands we're helping." "It led you to us," Olivia said quietly, "like it knew we needed help." Samuel studied her for a long moment. "Nature works in ways we can't always understand. Some folks around these parts believe foxes are messengers between worlds." "What worlds?" Harper asked sleepily from her nest of blankets near the fire. "The seen and unseen," Samuel replied with a wink. "The known and the mysterious." Olivia expected Harper to ask more questions. Her daughter's curiosity was usually boundless, but the warmth, food, and exhaustion had finally caught up with her. Her eyelids drooped, then closed completely, her breathing deepening into sleep. "The little one has the right idea," Samuel said, rising from his chair with a slight groan. "You both need rest. Take my bed, through that door. I'll sleep fine out here by the fire." Olivia started to protest, but Samuel raised a hand. "No arguments. Been sleeping by this fire longer than you've been alive, I'd wager. Besides," he nodded toward Harper's sleeping form, "she shouldn't be moved now she's settled." Too exhausted to argue further, Olivia thanked him and retreated to the small bedroom he'd indicated. The bed was simple but comfortable, covered in layers of quilts that smelled of pine and something herbal. Despite her lingering anxiety about their situation, the car, her phone, what she would tell her mother about their delayed arrival, sleep claimed her almost instantly. She dreamed of golden eyes watching through swirling snow, of howls that became whispers, of paths appearing where none had been before. And through it all, a sense that something was shifting, changing, rearranging itself around them in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. Olivia woke to sunlight streaming through a small window beside the bed. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. The rough wooden walls and handmade quilt were so unlike her modern apartment. Then memory flooded back, the argument with Rick, the hasty departure, the storm, the shed, Samuel and his cabin. Harper, where was Harper? She bolted upright, heart racing, only to freeze at the sound of childish laughter coming from the main room. Relieved, but still concerned, Olivia quickly dressed in her now dry clothes and hurried out. The scene that greeted her stopped her in her tracks. Harper sat cross-legged on the floor beside Samuel, who was demonstrating how to carve a small piece of wood. The fox lay nearby, watching their activities with apparent interest, its bandaged paw stretched out comfortably before it. "Mommy," Harper exclaimed when she noticed Olivia. "Look what Mountain Man is teaching me." "Mountain Man?" Olivia raised an eyebrow at Samuel, who shrugged with a grin. She insisted. Said Samuel wasn't a proper name for someone who lives in the mountains and rescues people in storms. Olivia couldn't help but smile. "I see. And what are you learning from Mountain Man this morning?" Harper held up a small piece of wood with several uneven notches cut into it. "I'm making a whistle, for emergencies like if we get lost again." The implication that they might face another dangerous situation sent a chill through Olivia, but she kept her expression positive for Harper's sake. "That's very practical. Breakfast is ready whenever you are." Samuel nodded toward the stove, where a pot of something that smelled like cinnamon and apples simmered. "Weather's cleared some. After you've eaten, we should talk about getting you both back to civilization." The reminder of their interrupted journey brought reality crashing back. Olivia's mother would be frantic by now, and Rick, well, he was probably alternating between worry and anger that she'd taken off with Harper after their fight. "I need to call my mother," Olivia said, glancing around for her purse where her phone was stored. "She's expecting us." Samuel's expression grew apologetic. "No cell service up here. Never needed it. There's a landline at the ranger station about 5 miles down the mountain. We can head there after breakfast. 5 more miles in the snow with a 3-year-old. Olivia's heart sank, but she nodded. They had little choice. "Don't look so worried," Samuel said kindly. "Storm's past. Road should be clear enough for my truck. We'll have you there in no time." "You have a truck?" Olivia couldn't keep the surprise from her voice. How had they missed seeing a vehicle near the cabin? Samuel chuckled. Keep it in a shed around back. No point having it buried in snow when I'm not using it. Relief washed over Olivia. They wouldn't have to walk through the snow again. They could reach a phone, call for help, maybe even get a tow truck for her stranded car. As they ate breakfast, a delicious porridge with dried fruits and nuts, Harper kept one hand on the fox's head, occasionally slipping it bits of food despite Olivia's half-hearted protests. "Fox is getting better," Harper announced, with the conviction of a child who hasn't learned to doubt her own observations. "See, it's putting its paw down more." Samuel and Olivia both looked. Indeed, the fox was testing its weight on the injured paw, seeming less pained than the night before. "That salve works wonders," Samuel said. "Another day or two, and it'll be ready to return to the wild." Harper's face fell. "It has to go away?" Samuel nodded gently. "That's where it belongs, little miss. Wild creatures need to be wild." "But it likes us," Harper insisted. "It helped us." "And that's why we must help it return home," Samuel explained. "The kindest thing we can do for those we care about is let them be where they're meant to be." The words struck Olivia with unexpected force. Wasn't that what she'd been struggling with in her marriage? Rick loved the city, thrived in its energy and opportunities. She had always felt suffocated there, yearning for open spaces and simpler living. Their latest argument had centered around his promotion, one that would root them even more firmly in urban life. "You look troubled," Samuel observed quietly, while Harper continued to pet the fox. Olivia shook her head. "Just thinking about what waits for us back home." Samuel studied her with those perceptive blue eyes. "Home should be a place that feels right in your bones. If it doesn't—" He trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. After breakfast, they prepared to leave for the ranger station. Samuel packed a small bag with water and snacks, just in case, though he assured Olivia the journey would be short. Harper insisted on saying a proper goodbye to the fox, kneeling beside it with solemn importance. "Thank you for finding Mountain Man," she whispered to the animal. "You're the bravest fox ever." To everyone's surprise, the fox rose and limped to the cabin door, pawing at it with clear intent. "Looks like someone wants to come along," Samuel mused. "Can it, please?" Harper bounced with excitement. Samuel exchanged a glance with Olivia. "Might not be a bad idea. Could release it closer to where you found it, more familiar territory." Olivia hesitated. It seemed strange to bring a wild animal on their journey, but after everything that had happened, strange had become their new normal. Besides, there was something about the fox's behavior that continued to puzzle her, an intelligence and purpose that seemed beyond ordinary animal instinct. "All right," she agreed, "but it rides in the truck bed, not inside with us." Harper cheered, while Samuel nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Wild is still wild, no matter how friendly it seems. They bundled up against the cold, though the day was considerably milder than the night before. The snow had stopped falling, and weak winter sunlight glinted off the white landscape, transforming it from threatening to beautiful. Samuel's truck was older than Olivia had expected, a rusted blue Ford that had clearly seen decades of mountain living. But it started on the first try, rumbling to life with surprising power. After settling Harper between them in the cab, Samuel created a small nest of blankets in the truck bed for the fox. The animal needed no coaxing, jumping in with more agility than its injury should have allowed, and settling comfortably on the makeshift bed. "Ready?" Samuel asked, shifting the truck into gear. Olivia nodded, though a strange reluctance had settled in her chest. Their ordeal was nearly over, yet she felt no rush to return to the life waiting beyond these mountains. The truck crawled down the snowy path that served as Samuel's driveway, emerging onto a wider forest road that had already been partially cleared by the sun's warmth. Harper pressed her face against the window, watching the wilderness pass by with wide-eyed wonder. "Look, Mommy, deer!" Sure enough, a small herd of deer picked their way through the snow at the forest's edge, their tan coats stark against the white backdrop. They raised their heads as the truck passed, watching with mild curiosity before returning to their foraging. "These mountains are full of life," Samuel said. "Most folks just never slow down enough to see it." They drove in comfortable silence for several miles, the truck navigating the winding road with Samuel's expert handling. Olivia felt herself relaxing into the seat, the tension of the past 24 hours finally beginning to ease. Then, without warning, Samuel slammed on the brakes. The truck slid slightly before coming to a stop. Harper squealed, more with surprise than fear, but Olivia's heart lurched painfully in her chest. "What?" she began, but the words died in her throat as she followed Samuel's gaze. Across the road, partially buried in snow, was a silver sedan, her car. But that wasn't what had caused Samuel to stop so suddenly. Beside the car stood 3 figures in the bright orange vests of search and rescue personnel. And next to them, his face a mask of worry and exhaustion, was Rick. "Daddy!" Harper cried, recognizing him instantly despite the distance. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. She wasn't ready for this confrontation. Not here, not now. Not with the emotional wounds of their argument still fresh and her thoughts in such turmoil. But there was no avoiding it. Rick had already spotted them, was already running toward the truck with desperate relief written across his features. Samuel turned to her, understanding in his weathered face. "Looks like someone wasn't willing to wait for you to make it to your mother's." Before Olivia could respond, the fox in the truck bed yipped loudly, drawing their attention. It stood alert, golden eyes fixed on Rick's approaching figure with an intensity that seemed almost protective. "It's okay," Olivia found herself saying, though whether to the fox or herself she wasn't sure. "That's Harper's father." The search party had noticed them now, too, calling into radios and gesturing toward the truck. This quiet mountain road was suddenly the center of a reunion she hadn't prepared for, filled with people and emotions and complications she'd been avoiding. Samuel squeezed her hand briefly. "Remember what I said about home," he murmured. "It has to feel right in your bones." Then he opened his door and stepped out to meet the approaching searchers, giving Olivia a moment to compose herself before facing what awaited outside. The fox watched it all unfold, its golden eyes reflecting the winter sun, its purpose, whatever it had been, apparently fulfilled. Yet something told Olivia that its role in their story wasn't quite finished. The messenger between worlds, Samuel had called it. Perhaps there were still messages to be delivered before their paths diverged for good. Rick reached the truck, his face a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Olivia! Harper, thank God!" Harper was already scrambling over Olivia's lap, arms outstretched toward her father. "Daddy, we had an adventure. We met a fox and Mountain Man saved us." Rick caught Harper in a fierce embrace, pressing kisses to her hair, her cheeks, her forehead, anywhere he could reach. His eyes, when they met Olivia's over their daughter's head, were filled with tears. "I thought I'd lost you both," he whispered, voice raw with emotion. "When your car wasn't at your mother's, when she said you never arrived." Guilt twisted in Olivia's stomach. In her anger and haste, she hadn't considered how terrified they would be when she didn't arrive as expected. "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. "The storm, we went off the road, my phone died. "We've been searching since dawn," one of the rescue workers explained, approaching the truck. "Your mother reported you missing last night when you didn't show up and weren't answering calls." Samuel stood slightly apart, watching the reunion with quiet dignity. The fox had jumped down from the truck bed and now sat at his feet, its injured paw held carefully off the snow. Rick finally seemed to notice the old man and the animal beside him. "This is Samuel," Olivia explained quickly. "He found us sheltering in an old shed and took us in. We were on our way to the ranger station to call for help." She hesitated, then added softly, "He saved our lives, Rick?" Rick's expression shifted, gratitude replacing confusion. He extended his hand toward Samuel. "I can't thank you enough. If anything had happened to them—" Samuel accepted the handshake with a nod. No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would venture out in a deadly storm to investigate a wisp of smoke. Not everyone would open their home to strangers. Not everyone would know how to survive in these mountains, let alone help others do the same. "And the fox?" Rick asked, noticing Harper's obvious attachment to the animal as she wiggled down from his arms to kneel beside it. "It found us first," Olivia said, the strangeness of their experience settling over her anew. "It was injured, and we helped it. Then it led Samuel to us." Rick's eyebrows rose in disbelief. "It led him to you? Like Lassie?" The comparison was absurd enough to break the tension, and Olivia found herself laughing despite everything. Something like that. The rescue workers were conferring with Samuel about the location of Olivia's car and the best way to retrieve it. Harper was chattering excitedly to Rick about their night in the shed, the scary storm, and Mountain Man's magical cabin. Everything was moving forward, resolving itself, returning to normal. So why did Olivia feel so unsettled? She watched as Harper stroked the fox's head, the child and animal sharing a connection that defied easy explanation. The fox's golden eyes were fixed on Rick now, studying him with that same unnerving intelligence Olivia had noticed from the beginning. "The fox needs a vet," Harper was telling Rick earnestly. "Its paw got hurt in a trap, but Mommy and Mountain Man made it better. But it still needs a doctor." Rick looked uncertainly at Olivia. "A wild fox? Honey, I don't think—" "Actually," Samuel interjected, "the little miss might be right. That injury needs proper treatment if the animal's going to survive in the wild. There's a wildlife rehabilitation center near the ranger station. They could take it in, make sure it heals right before releasing it." Rick seemed about to protest, but something in Harper's pleading expression made him reconsider. "If you think that's best," he conceded. One of the rescue workers approached Olivia. "Ma'am, we've called for a tow truck for your vehicle. Should be here within the hour. In the meantime, we'd like to check you and your daughter for signs of hypothermia or frostbite." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. The rescue team examined both Olivia and Harper, declaring them remarkably well despite their ordeal, thanks, no doubt, to Samuel's timely intervention and care. Plans were made to transport Olivia's car to the nearest service station. The fox was carefully placed in a carrier borrowed from one of the rescue vehicles, destined for the wildlife center Samuel had mentioned. Through it all, Olivia found herself watching Rick. The initial relief of finding them safe had given way to a more complex array of emotions that played across his face. Residual fear, lingering anger about their fight, uncertainty about what came next. He was trying to hide it for Harper's sake, but Olivia knew him too well to be fooled. They would need to talk, really talk, about what had driven her to flee into a snowstorm rather than stay and work through their problems. About the fundamental differences in what they wanted from life. About whether those differences could ever truly be reconciled. As the tow truck arrived and preparations were made to leave, Samuel approached Olivia one last time. "You've got some thinking to do," he said quietly, those perceptive blue eyes seeing more than she had shared. "Remember what I told you about home?" Olivia nodded, throat tight with emotions she couldn't yet name. "Thank you. For everything." "No thanks needed," he repeated, but accepted her impulsive hug with a gentle pat on her back. "The mountains have a way of showing us what matters. You just have to be willing to see it." He knelt to say goodbye to Harper, who flung her arms around his neck with the uninhibited affection of childhood. "Bye, mountain man. Can we visit you again, when Fox is better?" Samuel smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "My door's always open to friends," he said, ruffling her hair. "You take care of your mama and that Fox, you hear?" Harper nodded solemnly. "I promise." As they prepared to depart, Rick and Harper in his SUV, Olivia riding with one of the rescue workers since her car was being towed, the Fox safely contained for transport to the wildlife center, Olivia found herself looking back at Samuel standing beside his old truck. He raised a hand in farewell, a solitary figure against the vast white landscape, somehow not diminished by it, but rather belonging to it completely. She thought about his words regarding home, about the suffocating feeling she'd experienced in the city, about Rick's promotion and what it meant for their future, about Harper's joy in the wilderness, so similar to what Olivia had felt as a child, before adult responsibilities had crowded out such simple pleasures. The Fox watched her from its carrier, those golden eyes knowing and patient, waiting for her to understand the message it had been sent to deliver. The message that had been there all along, if only she'd been ready to hear it. As they drove away from the mountains toward the familiar world below, Olivia realized with sudden clarity that their adventure wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The true journey would be finding where they truly belonged, whether together or apart, in the city or somewhere wilder and more true. And somehow, she knew the Fox would guide them there too. 6 months later, the late spring air carried the scent of wildflowers as Olivia stood on the porch of the small cabin, watching Harper chase butterflies in the meadow. The mountains rose majestic in the distance, still capped with snow despite the warmth in the valley. "She's got more energy than a squirrel in autumn," Samuel chuckled, settling into the handcrafted rocking chair beside her. His weathered hands continued their work, carving a piece of pine into what would soon be a small fox figurine, one of many he'd crafted since they'd returned to the mountains. "She's happy here," Olivia said softly. "We both are." The decision hadn't come easily. Weeks of painful conversations with Rick had revealed what they both had been afraid to admit for years. They wanted fundamentally different lives. His dream was the corner office in the downtown high-rise. Hers was this: open spaces, clean air, a life where Harper could grow up knowing more than concrete and schedules. Their divorce had been amicable, if bittersweet. Rick visited Harper often, flying into the small regional airport 2 hours away. Sometimes he stayed in the guest room of the small house Olivia had purchased at the edge of town. Close enough to teach at the local school, far enough to see the stars at night without light pollution. And Samuel, dear Samuel, had become the grandfather figure Harper had never had, teaching her to fish in the mountain streams, to identify animal tracks in the soft earth, to respect the wilderness that had nearly claimed them that winter night. "Any word from the center?" Samuel asked, his knife pausing in its rhythmic shaving of the wood. Olivia smiled. "They're releasing her tomorrow." Harper's beside herself with excitement. "Never known a child to love a wild thing with such a pure heart," Samuel mused, nor a wild thing to return that love so completely. The Wildlife Rehabilitation Center had worked wonders with the injured fox. What was supposed to be a quick treatment and release had turned into months of recovery when they discovered the damage to the paw was more severe than initially thought. Throughout the fox's convalescence, Harper had visited weekly, forming a bond that mystified the center's staff. "Do you think she'll remember us?" Olivia asked, voicing the concern that had been growing as the release date approached. Samuel's blue eyes crinkled at the corners. "Some things can't be forgotten, no matter how wild the heart. That fox found you for a reason, brought you here for a reason." He gestured to the mountains, the meadow, the life they'd built. Message delivered, but the messenger might stick around anyway. Olivia laughed. "You and your messenger fox theory. You know, most people would call it coincidence." "Most people haven't spent 60 years in these mountains," Samuel countered with a wink. "Nature's smarter than we give it credit for." The sound of a vehicle approaching drew their attention. A familiar SUV wound its way up the dirt drive, stopping beside Olivia's new-to-her-used truck. "Daddy's here." Harper abandoned her butterfly chase and raced toward the car as Rick emerged, scooping her into his arms with practiced ease. Olivia watched them with a bittersweet smile. Despite the end of their marriage, they'd found a new beginning as co-parents. Rick had surprised her with his acceptance of her new life, even admitting on his last visit that he saw why she loved it here. "It suits you," he'd said. "You shine here in a way you never did in the city." "Coming to the release tomorrow?" Samuel called as Rick carried Harper toward the porch. "Wouldn't miss it," Rick replied. Harper's talked about nothing else for weeks. Later that evening, after Harper was tucked into bed, the three adults sat around Samuel's fire pit under a canopy of stars. The conversation flowed easily. Years of awkwardness long since smoothed away by time and mutual respect. "I've been thinking," Rick said during a lull, staring into the dancing flames. "That promotion I was so excited about, I turned it down." Olivia nearly choked on her tea. "You what?" "But it was everything you wanted." Rick shrugged, his face illuminated by the firelight. "I thought it was. But these past months coming here, seeing Harper so happy, so free, it made me reevaluate some things." "You're not thinking of moving to the mountains," Olivia said, only half joking. Rick laughed. "No, nothing so dramatic, but I've taken a lateral position, less prestige, more flexibility. I'll be able to work remotely 2 weeks each month." He glanced at her. "I could spend more time with Harper. Maybe rent that little place by the lake during summer and holidays." Emotion welled in Olivia's throat. This was more than she'd ever expected from the man who once said he'd rather die than live more than 10 minutes from civilization. Harper would love that, she managed. Samuel nodded approvingly. "Funny how life circles back sometimes, leads us places we never expected to go." Morning dawned clear and bright, perfect for the fox's return to the wild. The rehabilitation center had chosen a release spot not far from where they'd first found the injured animal, familiar territory where it would have the best chance of re-establishing itself. A small group gathered in the forest clearing. Olivia and Harper, Rick, Samuel, and 2 staff members from the Wildlife Center. The fox waited in a special carrier, more alert than Olivia had ever seen it, as if it sensed what was coming. Dr. Reyes, the center's director, knelt beside Harper. "Remember what we talked about? Once she's released, we have to let her be wild. That means no following her or calling her or trying to make her stay," Harper recited solemnly. "But she can visit if she wants to." Dr. Reyes smiled. "That's right. She's healthy and strong now, thanks in part to you. You saved her life that night." "She saved us too," Harper replied with the simple wisdom of childhood. The moment arrived. The carrier was placed on the ground, its door facing the dense woods. Dr. Reyes stepped back, nodding to Harper. "Would you like to open it?" With trembling fingers, Harper unlatched the door. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then a white muzzle appeared, followed by those unforgettable golden eyes. The fox emerged fully, its coat gleaming in the dappled sunlight, its once-injured paw now bearing only the faintest limp. It paused, surveying the humans arrayed before it. Its gaze seemed to linger on each face: Harper, Olivia, Rick, Samuel, before turning toward the forest. Freedom called, wild and insistent, but instead of bolting immediately into the trees as everyone expected, the fox circled once, twice, 3 times in front of Harper. The child watched, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Too wise to reach out, though her hands twitched with the desire to offer one last touch. The fox completed its circles, then sat on its haunches facing Harper directly. Their eyes met in a moment of perfect understanding. "Goodbye," Harper whispered. "Thank you for everything." As if it had been waiting for those words, the fox rose and trotted toward the tree line. At the edge of the clearing, it paused, looking back once more at the humans who had changed its fate just as it had changed theirs. Then, in a flash of white, it was gone, swallowed by the ancient forest that had witnessed countless beginnings and endings throughout time. Harper's small hand found Olivia's, squeezing tight. "She'll come back sometimes," the child said with absolute certainty. "Not always, but sometimes." Olivia looked down at her daughter, then at Rick, who smiled through his own unexpected tears, and finally at Samuel, who nodded as if Harper had spoken an undeniable truth. "Yes," Olivia agreed, understanding finally what Samuel had meant all those months ago about messengers between worlds. Some bonds can't be broken by distance or time, or even the boundary between wild and tame. As they walked back toward their vehicles, Olivia felt a sense of completion she hadn't experienced in years. The fox had led them here, not just to physical safety that stormy night, but to emotional truth, to belonging, to home. Rick fell into step beside her, Harper skipping ahead with Samuel. "I think I understand now," he said quietly. "What you were trying to tell me all those years." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "About finding where you belong." He gestured to the mountains rising around them. "I still don't want this for myself, but I see why you need it, why Harper thrives here. And I understand why the city feeds your soul," Olivia replied. "We just needed different things." Different things, but maybe not entirely separate lives. Rick's voice held a question. Olivia smiled, watching Harper point out a woodpecker to Samuel, their heads tilted skyward in shared wonder. No, not entirely separate. That evening, as twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, Olivia sat alone on her porch. Harper was inside, helping Rick prepare dinner, a new tradition they'd started during his visits. Samuel had returned to his cabin, promising to bring fresh trout for breakfast tomorrow. A movement at the edge of the yard caught her attention. There, half hidden in the tall grass, gleaming like a spirit in the fading light, stood the fox. Its golden eyes found hers across the distance, holding her gaze with unmistakable recognition. Olivia didn't move, didn't call out, didn't do anything to break the magic of the moment. She simply nodded her acknowledgement and whispered, "Thank you." The fox blinked slowly, a gesture that felt oddly like acceptance. Then it turned and vanished into the gathering darkness, a white ghost returning to the wild that had sent it to them in their hour of need. But Olivia knew with bone-deep certainty that it would return. The messenger had completed its task, guiding them all to where they truly belonged, but some connections transcended purpose, becoming something deeper, more profound. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Olivia felt the last piece of uncertainty fall away from her heart. This was home, not just the place, but the feeling, the knowing, the rightness in her bones. Inside, Harper laughed at something Rick said, the sound drifting through the open window like music. From the distant forest came the faint, echoing cry of a fox, wild and free, and somehow still connected to them all. Olivia smiled and rose to join her family. Their story, imperfect, unexpected, beautiful, continued on, woven now into the ancient tapestry of the mountains, guided by golden eyes and the wisdom of a messenger who had brought them, at last, exactly where they were meant to be.